Good morning to everybody from the Philippines. This is Johnny Warrior, Senior Instructor over at Thunderbird Outdoor Adventures. And welcome to Sunday Bushcraft Chat. And I think what we're going to do today is we're going to try and tackle some of the questions that I've been getting recently related to cutting tools and some of the uses. I've gotten questions running the gamut from if bolos or machetes make good bushcraft tools, as well as, what are the ideal tools? Can K-bars be a tool, or there's a gamut. There's a plethora of questions. So I think I want to address specifically questions. I know I don't get a lot of individuals talking on the chat on these live casts, but if any of you that are out there want to have any questions, just bring them up in the live chat and we will address them as we're having our discussion. I love a good morning coffee. It is excellent. First off, I hope you guys have been paying attention to some of the material that I've been posting up there. I started the Survivability 101 course, and I've taken care of two parts and broke the theory down so you didn't have an hour of me just droning on about bushcraft theory. So I kind of broke it up into the essential keys, rule of threes and everything that is associated with that, as well as, building your library and looking to anthropology as some of the paralleling science associated with primitive technologies and the preservation of primitive technologies, because all of this is really based historically on primitive technologies. So, like, for instance, coming here to the Philippines and living here in the Philippines, me getting knee deep and listening to a lot of the anthropology professors here, going to museums, looking at the tools, the craftsmanship, and then getting involved with people who are preserving those skill sets. That's how I can learn and enhance my bushcraft for this particular environment, as well as, North America and Europe has its resources as well that I think are invaluable, and definitely something that we need to be tapping into in order to preserve and advance our skill sets. A lot of us aren't doing this just for being prepared. Basic survival skills in the 72-hour scenario are easy to come. Well, not easy, but they're not so so didactically heavy. They're not as comprehensive. They're basic and fundamental. Practice well. You're going to be able to get out of any wilderness or 72-hour survival situation. If you're looking for self-reliance, or this is a hobby for me and not just a lifestyle, but when you're dealing with self-reliance, living off grid, homesteading, preservation of our ancestry, etc. Now, we really are starting to dive into the scientific and historical aspects of that and utilizing those right resources. Just like if you're an engineer, you're going to go talk, or you're interested in engineering or have a problem that needs an answer from an engineer, you're going to go to an engineer to learn it. So being able to go to anthropology and study those aspects of it will assist us in enhancing our skill sets. But you also find other interesting things, which, now we'll tie into that cutting tool thing. Looking through primitive technology in an anthropological sense, you start to see and archaeologically as well, because now we're talking about the physical principle of history. Looking at cutting tools and the evolution of cutting tools from bone into, the flint edges, that was a lot of the first effective cutting tools relative to being able to produce furs and process meats, and really start to even make light weaponry, as well as serious cutting tools to where we would be able to chop, which developed shelter, made our fire making more efficient, etc. And that really was when we started, the napping process, or flaking of flint to get that really hard. No, they're not really hard, but some of those edges are surgical, are very, very sharp and can cut easily. So that use using that as a tool and then becoming dependent on it made the evolution into metals during, the bronze, the iron age, etc. And we moved into the importance of being able to design and then, engineer a tool that would do the job properly that we're trying to get it to do, whether it's, butchering, or a utilitarian knife, or, a camp knife, or whatever that was, combat knife, whatever that was. Having the proper design with the proper metallurgy so that we can maintain that edge, right, was essential. Bayonets. Bayonets are generally made with cheaper steels because the edge on them, it doesn't have a very high edge requirement. It just needs to, it's more shape. It needs to be able to pierce easily and withdraw easily. It's not used as a cutting tool per se, the older ones. Now, the U.S. military had designed the Mark 9 that had a significant cutting edge into it, but that one didn't work out as effectively as they were hoping. So they went back to the standard bayonet. Now, when we're talking about bushcrafts, prepping, self-reliance, homesteading, the designs of our knives are different. And a lot of the questions are, what is the best knife? And honestly, the draw points, Kephardt's style, camp knives, these new metals that they're coming out with, metal mix, the metallurgy on the newer metals that they're coming out with, as well as the designs, are stunning, but so are the price tags on them. So the way I answer the question is, what is the best bushcraft knife is, well, what are you comfortable with? And I do have a couple rules for me. And those rules are, I don't carry a knife in the field that if I lose it, it's going to make me cry. All right. Because, that's why you carry two knives. Odds are when it's dark, you're under duress as far as whether to, process and get a fire started, or you're making a shelter or whatever. Odds are somehow you'll probably at some point lose a blade. It happens. That's why we carry two blades in our kit. One is none, two is one. So that's my first rule, is I need it to be cost effective. And then when you start talking about cost effectiveness, you really start talking about quality, because a high quality knife does demand a higher price tag. But there's some knives out there that produce quality at edges and are sufficient for the job. I mean, more than sufficient. Mora is one of them. I have several Moras. I've got the Mora Bushcraft Black, but the one that I use the most is generally the Mora Companion. And the reason why I myself use the Mora, now I do have modifications on my Mora. I modify it with a round file so that I have a cradle that holds a perfect 90-degree edge on a ferro rod. It makes it easier to strike with the ferro rod when I have that small cradle. If you look back on one of my videos, I show that modification that I put in there, and I also try to keep a 90-degree edge on the spine of the knife as well. Now, the Mora's benefits are, it's very cost effective. It cost me $14, and I've had this one for years, and it's the same one that I've had. I have not had to replace it. And the second one is the Scandi blade. Now, a Scandi grind on a bushcraft knife or a camp knife is easy to maintain in the field. A good quality stone and a fropping leather, you can maintain the blade very easy, and only once in a while do you have to do heavy maintenance on it. So instead of having a bevel on a bevel like standard modern knives do, a Scandi grind is a symmetrical angles coming into a single point. And I'm sure if you're listening to this and you're interested, you know exactly what a Scandi grind is. But if you do not know exactly what I'm talking to, I ask you to please Google Scandinavian grind and look at the examples. First, read the definition and then look at the examples on the image. That way you completely understand the benefits of having that type of grind. When you start grinding a bevel on a bevel, you start playing the angle game. And it's hard to get continuity on the small bevels. And then you start, actually redesigning the original blade. And if you're not, correctly sharpening it, you'll end up, it'll be dull for a while until you get the angles to coordinate correctly. It'll maintain a good edge, but the Scandi, you just set it down on the stone, push forward on it to the angle, and then, use the stone 10 on one side, 10 on the other, and you're good to go. Frop it to pull that burr off, and you're good. It's excellent. So those are my criteria. Well, two of my criteria again is cost effectiveness, and I want a Scandi grind. The other one is this is where the Mora, the only part of the Mora fails on me is it's a rat tail. And I would much rather have a rat tail than a partial tang through where the handle will come off. I've never had a Mora de-handle on me, but I have had other cost-efficient knives actually de-handle on me, which is annoying when you're batoning or processing wood or whatever you're doing, and the handle comes off your knife. It's dangerous as well. So those are things to consider. Full tang, that's usually a common rule, standard rule when we're talking about bushcraft knives. But I have used some knives that are not full tang that are very effective knives that are rat tail. Now, Mora does have a new full tang bushcraft knife that they have out there. It's expensive. It's I think about 140, I think is the last time I saw it, was $140. And again, it does address the one issue Mora has, which, kudos, it's great. But like I said, 14 bucks. It may not be my primary, but it's definitely my secondary. And generally in my small kits for a patrol, I throw a couple Moras in there, and that's what I use. Hey, Cedric. Thanks for saying that. Cedric's saying nice to have me back, and I actually appreciate that. I like it. I actually need to talk to you later, Cedric. I want to see when you're going to come up for a visit. So here are some of the questions I'm going to field. First, I'm going to talk about exactly what knives I use. My primary knife, believe it or not, is a buck. The buck makes a bushcraft. It's in a kydex with a ferro rod. It is a Chinese-made blade, which is disappointing, but it is full tang. It's got a 90-degree spine. It does not have a Scandi when it comes to you, but I put a Scandi on it. And it has got a nice, solid spine to it, and I like the feel of the finger indentation, and it's got good curvature and ergonomics. I can handle it well, keep control of the blade, and it is excellent. So that's generally my primary. At times, I do use the Mora, but my Mora is always my backup. All right, the Mora Companion or my Mora Bushcraft is a primary too. So those are the ones that I work. I don't use high dollar bushcraft knives. Does that mean that I possess them? Of course, but they're collectibles. I don't go to the field with, like I said, knives. I want a quality knife, and that I trust, and the steel is good. That is gonna do the work that I want it to do. But there's no need for me to spend $400 or $500 on a blade that I'm just gonna work. You're gonna work the blade. You're gonna work the blade. You know, it's going to get scratched. It's going to get whatever. It shouldn't get dinged, and it should hold the edge even after processing and batoning. And I'm going to get into my theory and principle on batoning. One of the other questions that I got was, do bolo knives, we call them bolos, but they're a curved machete here in the Philippines. They're very, very common, and it is a key and essential tool. And I was asked if, in my opinion, they make a good bushcraft knife. Well, I don't. If you're asking, if that question is catering to, can a bolo be a one fit wonder for all the equations in the camp setting and bushcraft setting? No, it is not. But is it a knife that is capable of being a key asset in a bushcraft setting? Yes. And just like a felling axe or a camp axe or a tomahawk, it has its place. All right. Here in the Philippines, you're not going to carry a felling axe with you. All right. I wouldn't even carry a hatchet with me. So that limits me. Yes, that leaves me to where I am going to be processing wood with my bushcraft knife, my dirt knife. Well, the bolo comes in when you are, they say, well, when you're off the beaten path. Damn, everything grows so quick here. On the planned path, you got to hack your way through it in spots. So it is a key tool because you can fell bamboo or small saplings for shelter. It takes the place of an axe. It's a lot lighter. It's a lot more controllable in the environment. You can't do big back swings because everything's growing around you. You're doing short hacks, and a bolo is a key essential tool in the bushcraft environment here in the Philippines. Now, if I'm in the eastern woodlands, no, a bolo is not something that I would put in my kit. I would have a camp axe. Actually, I'd have a hawk. I myself believe that the tomahawk is more practical in the sense that I can use it with or without the handle. I can use it as a wedge. I can use it as a hammer. I can use it as because I'm not felling for log cabins. I don't need a felling axe to bring down large oaks or pines. I'm mainly using sapling for wood fire and for building my structure, right? So a hawk is perfect for that. Well, a bolo is not going to do well on those hardwoods, and it's not going to, you're not going to need it to hack through a bunch of jungle or anything like that in the high Rocky Mountains or in eastern woodlands. It's just not practical. So yes, it has its place, but like I said, it has its place in its kit. Another question I got was, does the Marine Corps K-bar, right, make a good bushcraft knife? And that is kind of an interesting question because, God honest truth, I have a K-bar, an actual K-bar, a Marine K-bar that went through every one of I'm a prior military veteran, and went on multiple deployments. And I have one I carry with me that went on all my deployments. And I use it to process wood. That's the one that I use to process wood. because a K-bar, you can beat the crap out of a K-bar, and it's going to hold an edge pretty good, but it's got so much meat on it. It is awesome for processing wood and doing your hacking and everything else, because it does hold an edge pretty decent. This is the only knife that I hold a multiple bevel edge on that is not a scanty grind, because I do try and preserve the integrity of what a K-bar is. And it's done very, very well. Honestly, any knife that you feel comfortable with, that you're capable and efficient with, is going to make a good bushcraft knife. That's how it works. As far as, is it my primary? No. And if I'm using the Mora as a primary, I usually use this as a backup, and I do a lot of my bigger wood processing with it. I have it in my hand right now. I'm looking at it, and it's got a good spine. It throws a great spark on a ferro rod. It processes good. It keeps an edge effectively. It doesn't rust very much because it is a real K-bar. It does have a leather handle. And here in the Philippines, the odd thing about organic, like leather and stuff like that, cotton materials, you get mold, in storage. So this is one of those things that I have to do constant maintenance on, because the handle or mold will actually grow on the handle, and you don't want that stuff, going wild. It'll actually start to pit the material. So maintenance is a big thing on that. So yes, I think I use a K-bar as part of my kit at times, especially if I have hardwoods. If I'm processing, I'm in an area and I'm processing hardwoods, it. I am going to use a K-bar in order to process those woods, because it's going to take it. Now it's a full rat tang, but it's a very well made K-bar, makes a very well made knife. Now some rules, some other practical common sense things relative to your camp knives and stuff. I mean, I may be overstating the obvious, but one thing that you don't want to have in your knife is serrated edges. Remember, these are knives that you are going to have to maintain. If you can maintain your knife by fropping, you won't have to, you should not have to redo the edge on your knife every time you use it. Honestly, once I constantly use my knives, and once, maybe twice a year, I do a fine grit, redo my edge, not redo, but adjust my edge and make sure my edge is sharpened once or twice a year with fine grit stone, water stone. I haven't had to do it. I don't do coarse work at all on a blade unless I have an issue relative to a nick or a bend on the blade or something like that. Now you're talking about the quality of the knife or the misuse of a knife. You shouldn't be hacking rocks or metal, which is the only time I really have had anything, but seen nicks or anything on the good quality blades. Damn, I love that coffee. So, these are things to consider. Learning how to maintain your edge is key. I will do a video on that, but that's going to be outside of the Survivability 101 series. But here is one. Mares, he has a YouTube channel, and he has a camp sharpening, how to sharpen your stoning or sharpen your blade and maintain your blade in camp. Now, this dude you need to understand, Ray Mares is a perfectionist, and he is going to show you in detail every aspect of it. And he uses water stones as well. And in his demonstration, he goes from water stones, the whole aspects of water stones, to fropping. And then he has one that I don't use, but is a interesting idea, is using the edge of a window on a vehicle, and also to do, bend the burr over, straighten the burr out, or take all the aspects of the burr off after you've fropped. Because that's fropping. What you're doing is you're taking the leather, you get a small burr on the edge. Sometimes that burr, if it's done right, that burr will run the entire line of that edge. And when you start, if you don't maintain or get rid of it, or control it, it'll push over to one side and give the sensation that you don't have a sharp edge and you're not using your edge efficiently. So what fropping does is it pushes that small burr back and forth until it releases off the blade, just leaving behind, a good clean edge all the way down. And apparently sometimes, in theory, there's parts of that burr are too thick that the fropping will just simply bend over as well. So by running that edge lightly across the edge of a glass window, you roll your window a little bit and just run that edge across the top of that, it knocks that burr completely off. And, in theory, that's great. It's just, to me, I think that's an excess. But if you go and watch his video, it's a great practicum video, and he really breaks it down, and he can explain it, and some people obviously buy into that and think it's a good idea. I think it's an excess personally, but if you're learning, maybe doing it a couple times to see how you feel about it would be pertinent. Remember the rule. What I teach or what any other instructor teaches, simply a way. It's not the only way. It may not be the best way. It's the way that particular instructor has evolved his skill, his craft, and he can effectively communicate to you. That's through his experiences and through the influence he has had, he is teaching you the way he knows. Now, I've had multiple influences in the development of my craft. So you're getting kind of a blanket, and sometimes even in the teaching, you'll get multiple scenarios and explanations for a thing based on the fact that I have both, a military influence in the development of my craft, as well as classic training and development of my craft. So that is, where I come from. Cutting tools are key and essential. These, this is not one of those things. Any piece of equipment, you're building your kit, your bushcraft kit, as a minimalist imprint for your craft and for your prolonged survivability. So the only thing that should be in your kit is really the most difficult things to recreate in nature. So a cutting tool, cordage, containers, although you can make containers, but containers to cook in are key. And then, for ease, your friction fire is always available, but for ease, having several alternative means of making fire is key. And maybe, one or two pieces of sheltering material in the form of emergency blankets and, cordage, or, trash can barrel liners, 55 barrel liners, so that you can do the super shelters, or use that as a means of integrating into your shelter as well. So these are things in your kit. So you want things light, which means you don't want to have to carry backup on backup on backup. Now, there's a few things that, candling, you should have more than one. Fire making, you should have more than one. Cutting tools, you should have more than one. And I use bank line and 550 cord is the cordage that I use. So you need to understand that you have to balance the whole quality, because you're not going for quantity in your kit. You want to have your kit light. That way you're maneuverable. It's not draining you of caloric resources or contributing to dehydration, because you're lugging along 75 pounds, in a 110-liter Red Cloud backpack. You're just going to drain out. I have a small 40-liter ruck that's a waterproof ruck made by Hardware. That's my kit. And I don't even feel, most of what's in there is clothing, layered clothing for, my environmental control, because not all the time do I want to do shelters either. Sometimes throw up a hammock and don't even, I'll throw on a couple layers of clothes and that's it. So, you gotta plan things through and make sure that you're getting materials that are high enough quality to where they're going to endure the punishment that you're going to put through them. Does that mean that every knife needs to, be $200, $300, $400? No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, a lot of the materials that you can use can be repurposed materials. Like, why can't you use an old hickory butchering knife as a camp knife in your kit as a backup knife to one that you might have spent a little bit more money on? Some of those older knives, they're great steel, right? Over here, they make a lot of the knives out of leaf steel from vehicles. Man, that steel that they put in leaf springs holds an edge incredibly well, and it endures a lot of abuse. Okay, I got Mr. Tux on there. What are the priorities for saw, fixed blade knives, axe, pocket knife, in order of importance? A fixed blade bushcraft or camp knife is always your priority. Folding knives, although a pocket knife and a folding knife are kind of nice things, they really don't have a place in the kit or in the realm of primary tools. I would say, I don't even take a pocket knife out in the field. I just lose them, because I'm always you're going to use a fixed blade knife for processing wood. You're cutting, processing foods, any of that knife, that fixed blade knife is what you need. It's safer. You're going to have more control. You want a blade that's, 4 inches or less, that way you can control it in the finer detail work. And you don't need to have a kit of 7 blades going out to the field. Like I said, your primary and a secondary. 1 is none, 2 is 1. Saws, the Boca saw, or Laplander, folding Laplander is what I use. I have. I don't always take it out. It's not, it has its place as well. But if I'm in the eastern woodlands of the U.S., I will have a Laplander saw, and I'll probably have a hawk or a camp axe and in my kit. Like I was discussing earlier, here in the Philippines, you won't have an axe at all or a saw. What you'll want is a bolo, because you're going to find it has more practical purpose for processing materials here, hacking hedgeway, clearing out camp areas. You're going to get more done with a bolo here in the Philippines than you will an axe. So when you're asking what the priorities are, the first thing you need to do in your planning stage is really take a look at the environment you're in and plan off of that. Again, let's say if I'm going out here in the Philippines, I'm going to have 2 fixed blades, most likely my Mora and my buck, that buck that I was telling you about. Then I will have a bolo. So that's what I'll carry. I have 2 types of saws that I do carry. One of them is a last resort saw, which is basically a section of chain um, chainsaw blade that has 2 leather handles on it that you can throw under, and you can, use friction to break through. And if I'm going out for an extended period of time and I need a backup in order to process materials, I'll take that with me. But my folding Laplander is the primary thing that I use to process larger piece of woods. If I'm in the woodlands, back in the States, I'll have my Laplander, a cap axe, 2 blades, right? And that's what my kit will consist of. I kind of hope that answers your question, Mr. Tux. I know you're looking for a number one, number two. No, wire saws are worthless, man. They look good and they're great gadgets, but there are places in the survival kit, which is a kit that you build for last resort. And now with the handsaw that I was discussing, see, I like buck saws. I do carry a buck saw back in Oklahoma and in the eastern woodland areas because they're so easy. You just need the saw blade and 2 eye hooks. You can make the handle and the tension handle out of material when you're processing your wood for your camp set. So a buck saw is absolutely my favorite. The Laplander is also, I put that just right alongside of it as well, right? It's just a buck saw. That blade, you can get a big buck saw to process big material, and all it is a blade and a couple, hooks, screwed hooks that you can easily build the handle off of. So those wire saws, I wouldn't even put them in the survival kit. I use the one that I was explaining. It's just a section of chainsaw blade with 2 nylon handles because it's more aggressive. Those wire saws just make you tired, man, and eat up your hands. When they first came out, yeah, they were pretty ingenious because at least you got a tool that you're making headway on. But with my personally using them multiple times versus the newer types of emergency saws that are available, I would just stay away from the wire saws. I hope that answers that question. Some of the other things that to consider when you're building your kit relative to the quality issues. And I really, really challenge you, repurpose material, because there is a lot of good quality, what we would classify antiques that are extremely usable in the bushcraft environment that'll endure abuse for years and years and years. And you're not going to spend, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on them. A lot of this stuff you can find in antique shops or garage sales or anything like that. I mean, anytime I can pick up a little bit, you should see, I've got when I'm not going to be hiking on the trail so much, if I have a base camp, I actually have a cast iron pan set that I use that is absolutely, the thing's old, damn near, well, it's over 100 years old. But it serves me well. And, it's a little 6-inch pan that I can actually cook everything in. I also have a small Dutch oven that I'll use in a base camp situation instead of one of those cast iron kettle pots, because it is a little lighter and it's easier to pack, and it has more purpose behind it because I can use it not just as a kettle, but I can also use it as an oven. So I try to make sure that the things that I have has more than one purpose to it. That way I'm not carrying a multitude of material. Okay. Yeah. All right. What Mr. Tux is saying is he's asking because many hikers are maniacs about minimizing weight, and all they carry is a Swiss Army knife and a wire saw. I think that's irresponsible because there are very, very few. First of all, There are very, very few commercial survival kits that I would bet my life on. You know, they're always absent of something, or quality is a huge issue. And there are a couple, and you probably be surprised as some of the makers. There are a couple manufacturers out there that make some pretty extensive throw in the pack survival kits that I do like. But let me first really tell you my theory on survival kits. If you are truly a craftsman in bushcraft, all your survival kit is your head, all right, your mind. Those skills that you possess are your primary survival kit, because everything in your ruck should be minimalized and dual purpose to the point that everything in your ruck is a part of your survival kit. That being said, sometimes you separate from your kit, like if you're doing a scout outside of your base camp, or let's say you're out looking for firewood and you just seem to get lost or whatever. Having a kit that is built to where it can fit in your pocket is always a good layer of common sense. I am not a Altoid tin can advocate, but Gerber, Bear Grylls went up. Now, the whole Bear Grylls fad thing, a lot of the stuff that's out there is just novelty items. You know, there was a lot of discussion about the knives that he put out, because he had them with, the sawed edges and whatever. Most of what it is junk, and it's not, worth the money. But they make two good quality. One of them just Gerber straight, and the other one is a Bear Grylls Gerber brand survival kit. They come in a nylon pouch, and the multi-tool and some of the material that's in them are high quality. They do have the wire saws in there, but see, wire saws can be used as snare wire. They usually have a spool of snare wire, small fishing kit, whistle, compass, a couple added fire making devices. So, and then they'll put it in a waterproof pouch that goes into a nylon bag, and you can slip that into a cargo pocket so easy with a larger ferrule rod, and you're good to hook right there. Blam. So I do believe that they have their place, but it's not one of those things that are, hey, this is my go-to point for increasing my survival. What it is just a little EDC, pouch, just in the event to cover that small 1 or 2% chance that you're going to be separated from your primary ruck and get into a survival situation. That fills that gap. All right, that's my theory on that. These hikers that are going on, okay, Cedric is here saying warm weather survival really makes me think differently. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, but like you said, always carry quality. Yes. Now here's a couple things, and I'm hoping that you watch those theory, especially the first one, part 1. When I was talking about, warm weather versus cold weather, survivability, and some of those issues where we automatically start to assume in warm weather we don't have to worry about core temperature management as much as we do cold weather, when that's not true, especially here in the Philippines, where most likely what you're going to see is stuff to do with mountains, right, is where the trails are, and then you get that cold weather moisture building up with that hot weather thermal influx, and those storms come off unpredictable. Temperatures drop 10-15 degrees, and there you are in a situation where you're wet and you don't have the proper thermal regulation clothing, and your core temperature starts to drop, and you're in a situation where you can actually have hypothermia in the Philippines. And that's easy here in northern Luzon with the Sierra Madres, and then when you go up in the Baguio and the high mountains over on the west coast, it gets really, where you need to be cautious about cold weather. Yeah, Mr. Tux, there are a lot of fake Gerber knives out there, like the Bear Grill series. I see them in Lazada.com.ph. Yeah, well, even the Bear Grylls Gerbers are a lot of fakes on them. So from the original Bear Grylls to the fake Bear Grylls, you put them side by side. Even though there's a quality issue in the original Gerber, there's even more so between the fake. And I don't want to bag on the Bear Grylls stuff too much, because here's one thing that marketing plan did. Bear Grylls really opened up the market for making a lot of outdoor material accessible. It's just, if he's going to put his name on it, he needs to make sure that the quality's a little bit better. When those Gerber knives with his name on it first started coming out, there was actually, there was actually a few of them that were pretty good quality knives. But I don't know why he ever came out with quote unquote bushcraft or dirt knives that had serrated edges. That's just, to me, a no-no. That doesn't make any sense. But some of the components related to it by, integrated ferrule rods, having a hilt that could be used as a hammer. There was some stuff that was kind of pretty cool about it. It's just the metallurgy and this, quality in some of the stuff was questionable. Yeah, I used to love Kershaw's. I still like a Kershaw knife. I think it's, I actually grew up with buck, having buck knives, like a buck hunting knife, and then buck folders. My thoughts on serrated edges, Mr. Chuck, there's no place for them in the field. They're too hard to maintain. I'm all about straight edges and Scandi grinds. The easier you can make it to maintain your edge in the field, the better off you're going to be. So there is no place for serrated edges in a field environment. I don't really think, unless you're EMS or law enforcement, where you're cutting nylon or whatever, I don't even think in a combat zone, with the exception of an egress knife that you're going to, like a spider co that you're going to use to get straps off or something like that. But a standard carry knife doesn't need serrated edges at all. It, like I said, it's just, they're too hard to maintain, and they are going to wear. I used to carry bucks all the time, and the quality of buck went way down when they started moving their manufacturing processes overseas, and especially these Chinese-made one. Now, I say that, and I do have their bushcraft knife, and I use that bushcraft knife, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's for the amount. I think I paid $70 for the knife, right? Anything under $100, I think I don't feel too bad about paying. I got a couple of my Moras that are maybe a little bit more than that, but I think it's worth it, and I used the heck out of this one. I mean, it's got the ferrule rod notch in it. It's got a great spine, to where I can take processed wood and make fine tender bundles, maintains an edge real well. I've beaten the hell out of it, and it still doesn't have any nicks or anything. So obviously the metal that is good, and it throws a good spark. So, it comes in a Kydex sheath, and it has a ferrule rod that's with it, but I usually don't use The ferro rod that comes with the knives, I don't use those ferro rods because that's my backup. I carry a large ferro rod around my neck, or in my equipment is generally what I do. I think that we went into detail quite a bit about my own personal theories on cost, quality, balancing your kit, building your kit, purposes, and before we wrap the show up, I wanted to yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Mr. Tux. Mr. Tux is saying the high-end buck knives are still U.S. made, but the lower price ones are all China made, but still good. But there was a time, I want to say maybe about 12, 13 years ago, that buck just went down the toilet. But I will admit that, yeah, I mean, I'm starting to go back to them. I do have a 3.5-inch folder, like old school, that I still keep in my kit that I'll use sometimes out in the field, especially if I have a base camp, because it's easy to the leather pouch is easy and accessible. So I still have a lot of this stuff, and I find there's worth and value to them, to using them, and the quality of buck's there. I think you're getting a good bang for the buck. Now we're coming to where I need to wrap this up. I don't want to do much more than an hour, so let's talk about our herb for the week. And what I want to talk about is bee balm, or lemon bee balm. Now, this is generally U.S., but this stuff is starting to emerge here in Asia pretty prolifically, especially as bee balm being a plant that attracts honeybees and is part of a supplementation program for the health of bees. You're seeing it emerging, here in the Philippines. There's an honey industry that's growing pretty good, and they're using this here. So you're being able to see it more and more here as well. I just don't think they understand the alternate value outside of caring for their bees. And what it's Monarda. Okay, some of you might have heard of Monarda honey or bee balm honey. What that honey is it carries some of the medicinal properties to it, and in the honey itself. So that particular honey has medicinal properties. Most of it is external rather than internal. And what the medicinal uses of lemon bee balm or bee balm is really antimicrobial for bacterial and viral infections internally. So like viral sore throats or strep throat, stomach issues, whatever. And what they do is they'll use it fresh or dried, right? But they'll make it in either a decoction. And what a decoction is when your constituent is packed and or boiled, right? Or a tea, okay? And it also can be used as a wash, or it can be tinctured in 40% alcohol, which is when you take dried material and you put it into a jar, top it off with 40% alcohol, and that can be, liquor, vodka, and top it off and set it aside for 30 days. It draws the constituents out, and then you can use that tincture as the medicinal. And it's used predominantly internally. It's a good diaphoretic. It's good for cold and flus, good and the gargles for strep throat. And if you, it's good for upper respiratory, respiratory infections. I would say up to, but not past bronchitis. And sinus infections, throat infections, mouth sores, thrush, strep throat, mono, it even works as for UTIs internally and yeast infections, and it's effective for thrush, oral thrush. Then there is, because it's of a the mint family in actuality, so there's some other practicums on it. It's good for indigestion if you're going to use it. If you take the decoction or in tea, if you've got indigestion, just like you would use peppermint, because it is part of the mint family, bee balm will do the same thing. Externally, what they do is they'll use it for wound infections, yeast infections, and ulcerated wounds in the form of a wash or a poultice or a dried material that they'll sprinkle on there and then wash out after an hour of contact. A personal hygiene episode in the future would be nice. I could do that. Field personal hygiene. We could do that. I could do that for you guys. So I challenge you guys to go online and explore both, the availability and the usage of Monarda or bee balm, lemon bee balm. The honey, that Monarda honey that I was talking about, a lot of times is used in wound care because the Monarda is in it. Honey is hydrophilic, hydrostatic, and it also makes honey itself is also a good antimicrobial. So you add Monarda to it. That's generally, they literally just put a dab of honey on the wound and use that with some ground up bee balm in it as well. So, take a look at it online, Google it, see its availability, explore it more. And next week we'll have another one. We'll have another topic. And it'll be, again, same time, between 8 and 9 a.m. is when I'll start it. Hope to see you then. Hope you enjoyed this one. And until next time, make sure you get out there, see the adventure, get some dirt time, and take the time to see nature in its raw form as it is beside you. Peace out, guys.